The first thing I say to them is that the Bible was not revealed in English, and that whenever you read something in a language other than what's revealed, you're relying upon the translators. Okay, and the things that you say that the Bible said in English, Jesus himself, he'd never said. And when we go back to the originals, to the Hebrew and to the Greek, we find out that the words have been changed, but they translated names, just like they translated Peter in the New Testament as the Rock. So this is what happened.
So you have a lot of mistranslation, you have actually a lot of addition.
For a long time I thought that the Bible was inspired and inerrant, that there were no mistakes in the Bible. But as I engaged in historical research on the Bible, as I was getting my PhD in New Testament studies at Princeton Theological Seminary, I started finding mistakes in the Bible. And this cut away at my assumptions that the Bible was inerrant. And then I started questioning other parts of my faith. Is Jesus really divine? Is there really a Trinity?
Did you know that at that time when you were a pastor?
At first I didn't, but later I found out that we didn't have the originals of the Bible. Mm-hmm. And we relied upon that what we had, and that's what I was convinced to believe, that what we have was all we can work with.
Do you want to know what makes knowledge grow? Then everybody watch the show. Are you ready? You're steady. If there is something you want to know, sit right back and watch Dean Show. The Dean Show.
Back here on the Dean Show, and we're trying to get people to think out the box, right?
Yep.
So let's give a live visual. Here we have the
Catholic Bible.
And this one is 66.
Yes.
So this is the King James. So now you have this book, the Revised Standard Version. This is 1952. And when we open it up, we see that they tell us that these are like 32 scholars of the highest eminence, backed by 50 cooperating denominations, like the highest church. They say that the King James Version has grave defects, so many so serious as to call for a revision. So did you know that the King James Version, now this one is thrown out. They've thrown out what was in this Bible, and in the King James Version, there's grave defects, so many so serious that now there's like some trouble here. I mean, did you know all these?
They're speaking about English.
Uh-huh.
And the King James Bible was written in 1611.
Yeah.
And they're speaking about English, and they're speaking about another English Bible, the Revised Standard Version, and none of God's messengers spoke English.
No.
So what are they talking about?
No, it's absolutely right. Jesus spoke Aramaic. My opinion is that he did not know Greek, and that he did not know Latin. I think he probably knew Aramaic. The Gospels are written in Greek, so already when you're reading the Gospels in Greek, you're a step removed from the words of Jesus, assuming that the words that are being recorded are actually words that he said, because they're written 30 or 40 years later, and maybe some of these words weren't things that he actually said. There are sayings in the Gospels that make better sense if you retranslate them into Aramaic from Greek. I mean, it's tricky to do. I mean, but it's fun too. So so give you an example. There's a saying that doesn't make very good sense in Mark chapter 2. I'll use the sexist phrasing of this because it's the one people are familiar with, and it's one that it's easier to make my point. Sabbath was made for man, not man for Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. Okay, sounds like familiar, but it doesn't make any sense. Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. What's the therefore? Because it doesn't work. Well, but if you say it in Aramaic, the words for man, meaning human being, and the word for Son of Man is the same word, Barnashah. Sabbath was made for Barnashah, not Barnashah for the Sabbath. Therefore, Barnashah is Lord of the Sabbath. That makes sense. So you retrovert it into Aramaic, and it adds up. And there are other sayings just as a side, so you need to do that actually if you're doing the historical Jesus study. The other side of that is there are some things that cannot be retroverted back into Aramaic, which means Jesus probably didn't say them. Give you a famous example. Every World Series behind home plate, you get somebody holding up a sign, John 3:3. You must be born again. This is a very interesting passage that people holding these signs don't realize the linguistic problems, which is this. When Jesus says this in the Gospel of John, he says, a person must be born anothen to see the kingdom of heaven. Anothen is a Greek word. Now, the word anothen is interesting because it actually has two meanings. It can mean from above, or it can mean a second time. Okay, it means both things. And you have to decide which it means depending on the context. Nicodemus misunderstands what Jesus says. Jesus is saying you have to be born from heaven to see the kingdom of heaven. And Nicodemus thinks, I've got to go crawl back into my mother's womb and be born a second time? And then Jesus corrects his mistake. No. And he tells him what he meant the first time. So the conversation hinges on the double entendre of this word anothen, the Greek word anothen. And you cannot reproduce the double entendre in Aramaic. So the conversation hinges on a particular Greek word that doesn't have a parallel in Aramaic, which means the conversation couldn't have happened like that. So.
How about Hebrew?
No Hebrew either. Yeah. But they weren't speaking Hebrew in Jesus' day. Jesus probably could read Hebrew, I think, but they weren't. It wasn't a spoken language in Palestine in his time.
Aramaic actually, in a sense, supplants Hebrew, so that by the time of Jesus, Jews in Palestine were not speaking Hebrew; they were speaking Aramaic. The language of Jesus is Aramaic, and Aramaic is actually closer to Arabic than Hebrew is. It's somewhere in between, and the Sabaeans, who are mentioned as one of the peoples who were seen as to be protected, speak Aramaic still in Iraq.
The Greek Bible, I believe, has trouble reflecting some of those idioms, metaphors, and understandings of the East. Where the Aramaic is an Eastern language, it's consistent with those traditions and understandings and axioms of the East. And when I started reading the translation from the Peshitta text, the Aramaic text in the English, I found it very rich, very revealing, and frankly changed my whole view of Jesus and some of his metaphors and idioms that he would speak about.